This is Carrie Johnson with the Iowa Department of Management. This is a brief webinar to help Iowa County hospitals have a better familiarity and understanding of the fiscal year 23 budget process with the Department of Management. I'll go over general budget information as well as show the online forms and highlight key dates. And first off, we'll start with some general budget information. The Department of Management's role in the budget process is to provide the forms, including these web-based forms that you will use, as well as instructions, and then technical assistance for any questions that you might have as you're working through the budget process. To access information and the online forms, you would go to the Department of Management's website. And we actually call this sort of the hospital resource page, right? So it's dom.iowa.gov/county-hospitals-boards. So when you need to access information from Department of Management, this is where you would go. One of the things you'll find on this page is tax rate documents. And what you'll see here is a variety of different spreadsheets available that list for prior years and the current year the tax rates for each hospital by type. So for instance, this is kind of what you'll see. You have each hospital and the different breakdown of the levy rates they're using, total levy dollars, etc. So it's helpful if you want to do some comparisons or want to look at historical information. So let's go over some budget timelines. You would publish notice of a public hearing and proposed budget summary using the DOM forms not less than 10, no more than 20 days before the date that you hold a public hearing on that budget. You would hold that public hearing, close the hearing, and adopt the budget. You certify that budget with the county auditor by March 15th. Department of Management compiles local government budgets and certifies final tax rates back to the county auditor by June 15th, and also provides consolidated rates. And that's just simply the rate in a particular tax district or geographical area that is the sum of the rate of all the taxing authorities within the area. So for instance, within a certain part of a city, it would be that area's city rate plus county hospital rate, et cetera, et cetera. The county auditor then prepares tax rates for county treasurer by July 1, and the treasurer prepares tax statements for property tax owners, and those property taxes are then due September 30th and March 30th of each year. And we'll take a moment to review the different rates that are available to county hospitals, and I will point out to you that the information regarding these rates are included in an instructions document that you will receive by email. It's also available to you when you're inside the budget forms. You can pull down that PDF of the instructions. And this slide just kind of gives you the different rates that you have available, restrictions, as well as the Iowa Code authorization. So we'll start out with the general fund levy. This is, of course, your most general levy and a very important one. Public hospital type hospitals under the code, there's 39 of those, and the general fund is for improvement, maintenance, and replacement of the hospital. They are limited by rate. If the population is under 225,000, the rate limit is 27 cents. Population at or above 225,000, so this would be Polk County, so Broadlawns, rate limit is $2.05. Revenue hospitals per the code, there are 4 of those. General fund is for operation, maintenance, and funded depreciation of hospital, and the rate limit is $1.08. There is one memorial hospital in the state that levies no property tax. Hospitals have available to them FICA and IPERS rates and funds. Those do not have rate limits. You levy the amount necessary, but it is limited to the employer's share of the FICA and IPERS contribution. You can use these if your general fund levy is at the maximum, and you do not show expenditures in the FICA and IPERS funds. You transfer the revenue generated by those levies back to the fund with the salary expenditure, so back to the general fund. Emergency levy for an emergency that cannot be financed through the general fund. It's covered under Code of Iowa 24-6. There is a levy limit of 27 cents per thousand. And when we talk about emergency, we're really talking about more of a fiscal emergency. So the hospital has dire financial straits that cannot be covered with the current levying ability. It does require approval of the state appeal board and a special form that's filled out. And that form is completed and also filed with the county auditor by March 15th, along with the adopted budget. So if this was the situation in the hospital, you would have to know this during your budget preparation. You would contact me and indicate you would request this Form 699. You would hold your hearing and adopt your budget, including that 27 cents. But then after your budget is certified by the county auditor, you would have to go to the state appeal board to maintain that 27 cents in your budget. You'd have to, have a hearing with them in order to determine if that 27 cents is allowable to remain in the budget. And funds must be transferred from that emergency fund to be spent. So you'd transfer it probably to your general fund to spend it. Unemployment compensation levy, it's to pay the cost of unemployment benefits, and there is no rate limit, but is the amount necessary and limited in purpose. Ambulance levy for purchasing, leasing, equipping, maintaining, and operating ambulance services. It's only for when services are not otherwise available. So it's not for situations where there's several ambulance options within a county. The rate limit there is 27 cents per thousand. Tort liability insurance levy, pay for the cost of tort liability judgments or all insurance necessary and prudent to the operation of the hospital. And again, no rate limit here. It is the amount necessary but limited in purpose to the cost of those premiums. Debt service levy is for payment for qualified outstanding debt. Form 703 in the budget supplemental detail must be completed. There is no rate limit. It is the amount necessary and also limited in purpose, and this is not typically used. Restricted funds and board designated. Many hospitals set aside funds from depreciation for building and improvements. Since all funds must be accounted for, and to distinguish these funds from restricted funds, a board designated fund may be established, and then money may be transferred from this fund to other funds by board resolution. And I want to take a moment to give you an update on a law change that occurred with this last legislative session. You may know, if you've been completing the budget, that your hospital as a tax levying body has been receiving commercial and industrial replacement dollars from the county treasurer in September and March, kind of along with your property tax payments. So back in the 2013 session of the Iowa General Assembly, they created a commercial and industrial replacement process. What they passed that year was a law that provided that commercial, industrial, and railroad properties are not taxed on 100% of their value each year. They're taxed on 90% of their value. As part of the legislation, then, the state would make a replacement claim payment to the county treasurer, which would then be distributed to each levy authority, each city, county hospital, whoever's levying property taxes, in September and March of each year. So the idea was they're lowering the taxable value of those classes of property. It's a state action, and the state will then replace locals the loss of that revenue. In the 2021 session, they passed Senate File 619, and that essentially phased out the state's replacement payments through fiscal 29. So essentially what the hospital received in fiscal year 23 will be phased out by 1/8 until they receive zero in fiscal year 30. So over the next essentially 8 years, you'll be phased out to a $0 amount. To see an estimation of the revenue that's going to be received, we do have a tool that's listed on the Department of Management's website. You'll also see this in the instructions. You would select hospital and your appropriate county. You can view the estimated revenue to be received during that phase-out period. And then you would report your estimated revenue in the line item commercial and industrial placement on your budget forms. The budget deadline is March 15th this year, and that would be a Tuesday, March 15th of 2022. And it's important to note as well that your budget can be protested by local citizens. Protesting a local government budget is covered under Code of Iowa 2427. Persons that are affected by the budget, the expenditure, the levy, or any item thereof may appeal the budget. Essentially, they gather signatures on a petition. The number of signatures required is determined based on the number of folks that voted at the last governor's election. So there'd be, a variation on the number of signatures. So that would be determined by your county auditor. But folks could gather signatures and file a budget petition with the county auditor. Their deadline would be March 25th, so essentially 10 days after your budget deadline. And then upon receipt of a valid petition, the county auditor would then forward the protest document to the State Appeal Board. State Appeal Board is a 3-member body of the Director of Department of Management, Treasurer of State, Auditor of State. They would receive the petition. They would schedule a local hearing on the matter to hear both sides of the argument, the petitioners, as well as kind of the hospital's rebuttal to the concerns of the petitioners, and then they would render a decision. They can reduce your tax asking as well as reduce your tax expenditures. A budget amendment is required for any increase in the totals for funds. So if you're in your fiscal year and you realize you did not budget enough expenditure in a particular fund, then you would need to amend your budget. The amendment must be effective before the expenditure amount is exceeded, so you amend before you spend. Budget amendments require the same notice, that not less than 10, no more than 20 days notice as the original budget. You hold a public hearing and pass that budget, same sort of general process as the original budget. Budget amendments are subject to protest as well. An amendment of the budget after May 31st that's properly protested but without time for a hearing is actually then void. So just kind of keep that in mind. But if you do need to amend in June, we recommend you do it, but there is a risk that if you're protested, there would not be time to render a decision by the State Appeal Board, so then your amendment would be void. The amendment form is found by logging onto the same online system you use to adopt your budget, and you select Amend on that current year budget. There's an Amend button. And there is a webinar on this amendment process that's viewable on that hospital resource page on the DOM website. And there's also instructions within the online amendment itself. So we'll take a few moments just to provide you with an overview of the online budget system. The forms look very similar to last year, the year before. If you were working in the system before, your login access should transfer over to this year. Let me know if it doesn't, or if you have someone that needs access that does not have it, or someone that needs to be removed, just simply send me an email. If you use the tab during your data entry, it does move between the cells that you can enter data. You can also use arrow keys to navigate side to side and up and down. As you move within a page, the cell that you're on will be highlighted, as you can see here, and the row and the column will be green, just to kind of help you, find your place in the form. Ending fund balances are produced by subtracting the sum of all expenditures from the sum of beginning balance plus revenues. So to log into the system, you would again go to that hospital resource page and select the blue button titled Submit and Amend Budget. You would use your Enterprise ANA login here to log into the system. And you're going to see a home screen that looks a little bit like this on the left-hand side. Once you're logged in, And then on the main page, the main navigation screen, it'll look like this. So it'll have your past budgets, current year and the 2021 budget. It'll have also the 2023 forms. And again, like I mentioned, if you need to amend that 23 budget, or excuse me, the 22 budget, you would click this amend button and that would start the amendment process for you. But to work in your 2023 budget, you would select edit. So once inside the budget, you see the tabs across the top that represent the different pages of the budget that must be completed. Again, though, if there's certain funds of the budget that you don't use, then you can obviously leave those blank. Data entered on the fund tabs and the various supplementary pages will populate over to your public hearing tab and the adopted budget summary tab. So again, you enter your revenue and expense detail on the supplementary pages, and the data on those detail sheets is automatically totaled and brought forward. So within each fund tab, you'll see two tabs essentially. You'll see a revenue tab and an expenditure tab. So you'd complete your revenue tab, save, move on to your expenditure tab, complete that for the fund, and then save. Once the 2021 valuations are filed in your county, the valuation figures that you need to complete your budget will be automatically populated into your form. Until valuations are filed or until the county auditor unfiles values, you see the following notice on the top of your budget forms. So you're probably not going to see value filed before maybe the end of December, beginning of January. January 1 is actually their deadline. But you may see early on in the budget process this notice pop up even after your value has filed if the county auditor had to go in there and make a change in value. So just kind of be aware if you see this notice, that means your value is not finalized at that time. You can still work in your budget. I highly recommend going ahead and doing your expenditures and working in your budget, but you cannot finalize it at that point because your values may not be final. So the adopted budget summary and tax request looks a lot like this. Again, your value is populated for you, both with and without gas and electric. Your only cells that you enter into are the blue cells. Blue cells you can enter, white cells are either pulled data or they're some sort of formula or summation. So you enter into your blue cells in this page your tax request. The system will then apply that to your value and calculate a tax rate for each of your funds. If you want to include electronic or virtual information on your notice, there is a text box at the bottom of the public hearing tab to add the information. Now, when you're in the proposed tab and you're adding information into the meeting location, it is actually a pretty large space, so you may be able to fit it in there as well. But if you want to highlight and pull out that virtual information, you can do that at the bottom of the hearing form. Once in the budget, you can, of course, check errors. You can save, which we suggest you do often, and you can also print at any time. You can print the full budget at any time, and then after you've proposed your budget for publication, you can also print only the publication notice, should you so choose. If you're in Google Chrome, which we highly recommend, you can select your local printer when you go to print, or you can print a PDF, save as PDF as your destination. So that way it generates a PDF. You can, save it off to your machine and print it later or what have you. You must, of course, check errors, and you can't publish your budget with any errors. So you'd want to check your errors, and if you have errors, it'll look like this in red. When you're error-free, it'll look like this in green, and you can propose publish your budget to get that public hearing notice to publish in your paper. So you do proceed. Once you do proceed with your proposed publish, you will get a screen to enter the date, time, and place for the hearing notice. And again, as I mentioned, this meeting location space is actually pretty large. You can probably include your electronic information in there unless you really have a lot, or if you want to separate it out and highlight it. So once you enter the information required on this screen, then you do propose. And the system, again, generates the notice you can print at that time, or you can save off to your system. You can also access it, the next day or at any point. You can go back and print that publication notice. Following the public hearing, the board can make any allowable revisions. And the only revisions they can do would be to decrease a tax asking or decrease expenditures. You can never request more taxes or more expenditures than what you published in your notice. But if they do decide to lower those figures in the budget, you would go back to the budget and select Return to Draft. And then the budget opens it up for edits. You go in there, make your changes, save, and you again would propose publish. Although in most cases, you're not publishing in the paper again, so you leave the original publication date the same, unless for some reason you do actually have to republish because of some other error. And then, of course, when you're ready, you would select Adopt. If no revisions are needed, or whenever you're ready to adopt, you click that Adopt button and you enter the adoption date and select Adopt. Once you're completed with your budget process, you would need to file the following documents with your county auditor. You would need to provide them with proof of publication for your budget notice, as well as a signed adopted budget and supplementary pages. So once you're done working in the online system, your next step is really to provide those documents to your county auditor. And of course, the deadline is March 15th. If you have any questions, you are welcome to contact me either by phone or by email. Thank you very much.